The crystal chandelier cast fractured light across the mahogany dining table as I adjusted my tie one last time. Rebecca's boss had spared no expense for this dinner party, the kind of gathering where careers were made and destroyed over overpriced wine and forced laughter. I should have known it would be the night my life imploded. "Try to smile tonight, Jake," Rebecca whispered as we approached the front door of the colonial mansion. "Mr. Harrison specifically asked about you. This promotion depends on making the right impression." I nodded, though something in her tone felt off. After 8 years together, I'd learned to read the subtle shifts in Rebecca's voice. Tonight, there was an edge I couldn't place. The door opened before we could knock. "Rebecca, and this must be Jake." Harrison's wife, a woman who looked like she'd stepped out of a country club magazine, ushered us inside. Everyone's been dying to meet the man who's captured our rising star's heart. The living room buzzed with conversation. Partners from Rebecca's law firm mingled with their spouses, creating the kind of social hierarchy I'd never quite figured out how to navigate. Rebecca belonged here in her black cocktail dress and pearls. I felt like an imposter in my department store suit. "Jake runs a military surplus business," Rebecca explained to a cluster of attorneys. "Very entrepreneurial." The way she said it made my work sound like a hobby. I bit back my first response and smiled instead. "How fascinating," said Derek Morrison, one of the junior partners. He'd been showing up at our house more frequently lately, always with some excuse about case files or strategy sessions. Must be tough competing with online retailers. "We do fine," I replied. "Turns out people still value quality and personal service." Derek's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Of course, though I imagine Rebecca's success opens certain doors for expansion." Before I could ask what he meant, Harrison called everyone to dinner. The dining room table seated 12, with Rebecca and me positioned near the center. I found myself between Derek's wife Linda and Rebecca's best friend Lisa, who worked as a paralegal at the firm. "You look tense," Lisa whispered as the first course arrived. "Everything okay?" "Just the usual pre-party nerves," I said, though that wasn't entirely true. Something felt orchestrated about the evening, like everyone was following a script I hadn't been given. The conversation flowed around topics I could barely follow: case law, partnership politics, vacation homes in the Hamptons. I contributed where I could, but mostly listened and watched Rebecca work the room with practiced ease. "So, Jake," Harrison said during the main course, "Rebecca tells us you two have been discussing marriage." The table fell silent. Every eye turned toward me, and I felt my face flush. Rebecca and I had talked about marriage, but never definitively. It was more of an eventual possibility than an active plan. "We've discussed it," I said carefully. "Discussed it?" Derek leaned forward. "After 8 years, most people would have made a decision by now." "Derek," Linda warned, but he continued. "I mean, what's the holdup? Rebecca's brilliant, successful, beautiful. If I were single—" He let the sentence hang. Rebecca's face had gone pale. "Maybe we should change the subject." "No, it's a fair question," Harrison said. "Marriage is about commitment, partnership, building something together." He looked directly at me. "What kind of future are you offering Rebecca?" The question hit like a slap. Around the table, faces watched with the kind of fascination people reserve for car accidents. I opened my mouth to respond, but Rebecca beat me to it. "You know what?" Her voice cut through the silence like a blade. "You want to know about marriage? About commitment?" She turned to face me, her eyes blazing with something I'd never seen before. "You could never be a good husband. I'm not going to marry you." The words echoed in the sudden silence. 12 people stared, their expressions ranging from shock to barely concealed satisfaction. Derek's mouth curved into the slightest smile. I looked at Rebecca, really looked at her. Her chest rose and fell rapidly, her hands trembling slightly. But her eyes held no regret. only a kind of desperate defiance. I didn't say anything, couldn't say anything. The words had hit with surgical precision, cutting through 8 years of shared memories, inside jokes, quiet Sunday mornings, and whispered promises about someday. Instead, I set down my napkin, pushed back my chair, and stood. The scrape of wood against hardwood seemed impossibly loud. I reached for my jacket on the back of the chair, slipped it on with deliberate calm, and walked toward the front door. "Jake, wait!" Rebecca's voice cracked, but I didn't turn around. The cool October air hit my face as I stepped outside. My hands shook as I unlocked my truck, but I managed to start the engine and pull away from the circular driveway without looking back at the house full of witnesses to my public humiliation. The drive home passed in a blur of streetlights and stop signs. I kept replaying the moment, searching for signs I'd missed. Had Rebecca planned this? The timing felt too perfect, too orchestrated. Derek's leading questions, Harrison's pointed remarks about commitment, the way everyone seemed to be waiting for something to happen. My phone buzzed with texts, but I ignored them. Whatever explanations or apologies were coming could wait. Right now, I needed to process what had just happened in the privacy of my own space. The apartment felt different when I walked in, smaller somehow, like the walls had moved closer together. I poured 3 fingers of bourbon and sat in my recliner, staring at the blank television screen. 8 years. 8 years of building what I thought was a solid relationship. We'd talked about marriage, sure, but never with urgency. I'd assumed we were both comfortable with the pace of things. Apparently, I'd assumed wrong. The bourbon burned, but it was a good burn, clean and simple, unlike the mess my life had just become. My phone buzzed again, then again. I let it ring until the sound became unbearable, then switched it to silent. Whatever Rebecca had to say could wait until morning, or longer. I must have dozed off in the chair because the next thing I knew, someone was pounding on my front door. The clock read 1:17 a.m. The knocking continued, desperate and rhythmic. "Jake, please!" Rebecca's voice, muffled by the door. "I know you're in there. We need to talk." I moved to the peephole and looked out. Rebecca sat on the hallway floor outside my door, her back against the wall. Her makeup had run in black streaks down her cheeks, and her carefully styled hair hung in disheveled strands. The cocktail dress was wrinkled and stained. "Please," she said again, though she couldn't see me watching. "I made a mistake. I panicked. Jake, please open the door." I watched her for several minutes. She alternated between knocking and pleading, her voice growing more desperate with each attempt. Other doors in the hallway opened briefly, neighbors checking on the disturbance, then closed again. Mrs. Patterson from 3B finally emerged in her bathrobe. "Excuse me, but some of us are trying to sleep. If you don't quiet down, I'm calling the building manager." Rebecca looked up at her with swollen eyes. "I'm sorry. I just need to talk to my boyfriend. Please." "At 1:30 in the morning? Take it somewhere else." Mrs. Patterson disappeared back into her apartment with a decisive click of the lock. Rebecca sat there for another 20 minutes, occasionally calling my name before finally giving up. I watched through the peephole as she gathered her purse and walked toward the elevator, her shoulders shaking with silent sobs. Only then did I check my phone. 17 missed calls, 12 voicemails, 23 text messages. The texts started apologetic and grew increasingly frantic. "Jake, I'm so sorry. I don't know what came over me. Please call me back. We can work through this. I didn't mean it. You know I didn't mean it. Where are you? I'm coming over. Please don't shut me out. I love you." The voicemails told the same story, Rebecca's voice growing more desperate with each message, background noise suggesting she was still at the dinner party for the first few, then the quiet of her car, then the echo of my hallway. But it was the text that came at 2:47 a.m. that stopped me cold. It wasn't from Rebecca. "Do you even know what happened after you left?" The sender was Lisa Martinez, Rebecca's best friend and co-worker. I stared at the message for a long moment before typing back, "I'm listening." The response came immediately, as if Lisa had been waiting by her phone. "She completely lost it, Jake. The second you walked out, she broke down crying. I mean, full-on ugly crying in front of everyone. Mascara everywhere, hyperventilating, the whole thing." Another message followed quickly. She kept saying she panicked about commitment and lashed out, that she didn't mean any of it. Then, "But here's the thing. Everyone turned on her instantly. Linda called her cruel. Harrison's wife said it was the most heartless thing she'd ever witnessed. Even Derek looked uncomfortable." I found myself leaning forward, reading each message as it appeared. "Nobody would give her your address. Nobody would drive her to your place. She begged, Jake. She was on her knees begging Linda to take her to you, and Linda just walked away. The worst part? After you left, Derek started making these comments about how you probably saw this coming and how Rebecca was obviously ready to move on. Like he was already positioning himself as your replacement." My grip tightened on the phone. Rebecca went off on him, screamed that he was a disgusting opportunist and that she'd never be interested in someone like him, called him a vulture. Harrison had to physically step between them. "She took an Uber to your building, sat outside your door for over an hour. Mrs. Patterson threatened to call the cops. Rebecca finally gave up around 2. I set the phone down and walked to the window. The parking lot below was empty, except for a few scattered cars under the yellow streetlights. The phone buzzed again. "Jake, I've known Rebecca for 15 years. I've never seen her like this. She destroyed herself tonight, in front of everyone who matters to her career." Then, "The group chat is blowing up. Everyone's talking about it. The consensus is unanimous. The relationship is over. People are saying you handled it with class by just walking away." Another message. "Derek's been texting people, trying to control the narrative, saying Rebecca's been unhappy for months, that this was inevitable, but nobody's buying it. Everyone saw what really happened." I poured another bourbon and considered my response. Finally, I typed, "What exactly did she say about me before I left?" That's just it. She didn't say anything bad about you personally. It was like she was talking about the concept of marriage, not about you specifically. Like she was arguing with herself and you got caught in the crossfire. Did she seem prepared? Like she'd planned to say it? No, God no. She looked as shocked as everyone else when the words came out, like she couldn't believe she'd said it. I stared at the messages, trying to piece together the evening from a different perspective. Rebecca's panic, Derek's opportunistic comments, the way everyone had turned on her after I left. "Lisa, can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Has Derek been pursuing Rebecca behind my back?" The pause stretched long enough that I thought she might not answer. "I think Derek's been waiting for an opportunity. He's made comments about how Rebecca could do better, how she was wasting her potential with someone who didn't match her ambition. And Rebecca has never shown any interest. Until tonight, I would have said she was completely devoted to you. But Jake, the way she exploded like that in front of everyone, I think the pressure got to her. The constant comments about marriage, about her future, about what she deserves. I understood then. Rebecca hadn't planned to humiliate me. She'd been backed into a corner by people who'd been undermining our relationship for months, and she'd lashed out in the worst possible way. It didn't excuse what she'd said, but it explained it. "What happens now?" I typed. "That's up to you." "But Jake, the Rebecca who sat crying in that hallway for an hour isn't the same person who said those things at dinner. She knows she destroyed something precious tonight. And Derek is probably planning to swoop in once the dust settles. He's already started reaching out to people, playing the concerned friend angle." I finished the bourbon and made my decision. "Lisa, I need you to do something for me. Anything. Tell Rebecca I got her messages, all of them. Tell her I watched her in the hallway tonight and I heard every word she said. Okay. Tell her I understand she panicked, that I know she didn't plan to hurt me like that. Jake, does this mean… Tell her I forgive her for what she said, but I can't forget how easily she threw away 8 years when someone pressured her. Tell her that's not the kind of partner I need for marriage. The response took longer this time. Are you sure? She loves you, Jake. She made a terrible mistake, but she loves you. I know she does. But love isn't enough if she can't stand up for us when things get difficult. Tonight proved she'll sacrifice our relationship to avoid an uncomfortable conversation. What about Derek? He's not going to give up. I smiled grimly in the darkness of my apartment. Derek can have what's left, but he should know he's getting someone who'll throw him under the bus the moment things get complicated. That's harsh. That's honest. Rebecca showed everyone who she really is tonight. I'm just the only one paying attention. I set the phone aside and headed for bed. Tomorrow, I'd start the process of untangling 8 years of shared life. Tonight, I'd sleep better than I had in months, because sometimes the best response to betrayal isn't revenge or forgiveness. Sometimes it's simply walking away with your dignity intact and letting the other person live with the consequences of their choices. The next morning brought a clarity I hadn't expected. I woke up refreshed, without the usual anxiety that had been plaguing me for months. It was as if Rebecca's public declaration had lifted a weight I didn't know I'd been carrying. My phone showed 37 new messages. I deleted them all without reading them. Instead, I made coffee, showered, and drove to my store. The military surplus business had been struggling lately, partly due to online competition, but mostly because I'd been distracted by relationship issues I hadn't fully acknowledged. The bell above the door chimed as I entered. The familiar smell of canvas and leather goods felt like coming home. This place was mine, built from nothing over the past 6 years. It might not impress lawyers and judges, but it was honest work that served real people. I spent the morning reorganizing inventory and updating the website. Around noon, the bell chimed again. I looked up to see Tom Bradley, an old army buddy who'd become a regular customer. Heard you had some excitement last night, he said, examining a display of tactical boots. Word traveled fast in our circle. News to me, just a dinner party that ended early. Tom grinned. According to my wife, who heard it from her sister who works at that law firm, you handled yourself like a gentleman, walked away instead of making a scene. Sometimes that's the only move that makes sense. Smart man, though I hear the lady in question didn't fare as well. I raised an eyebrow. Word is she had a complete meltdown after you left. Made quite the impression on her colleagues. Tom's expression grew serious. Look, Jake, I don't know the details, but I've seen enough relationships implode to recognize the signs. You did the right thing walking away. The afternoon brought more visitors than usual. Some were genuine customers, but others clearly came fishing for gossip. I treated them all the same, polite, professional, and completely uninterested in discussing my personal life. Around 4 o'clock, Derek Morrison walked through the door. He looked different in daylight, smaller somehow, less imposing than he'd seemed at the dinner party. His expensive suit looked out of place among the camouflage and combat boots. Jake, he said, approaching the counter with the kind of smile salespeople use on difficult customers. I wanted to check on you after last night. That must have been difficult. I continued pricing inventory tags without looking up. Can I help you find something? Actually, I came to talk about Rebecca. Now I did look up. I don't think that's appropriate. Look, I know this is awkward, but she's in a bad place right now. She made a mistake, but she's beating herself up about it. Maybe if you talk to her… Derek, I interrupted, setting down the pricing gun. Why exactly do you think my relationship with Rebecca is any of your business? His smile faltered slightly. I'm just trying to help. As a friend. A friend, right. I leaned against the counter. Tell me something, Derek. How long have you been waiting for an opportunity like this? I don't know what you mean. Sure you do. The leading questions at dinner, the comments about Rebecca's potential, the way you positioned yourself as the voice of reason after she had her breakdown. Derek's face flushed. You're reading too much into, am I? Because from where I stand, it looks like you've been undermining my relationship for months, waiting for the right moment to swoop in as the better option. That's ridiculous. Is it? Then explain why you're here, in my store, trying to convince me to take back a woman who publicly humiliated me. What possible motive could you have for wanting us to reconcile? Derek opened his mouth, then closed it again. For a moment, his mask slipped, and I saw something calculating in his expression. You know what I think? I continued. I think you pushed Rebecca into that outburst, then realized too late that she's not the kind of person who can live with hurting someone she loves. Now she's damaged goods, and you're stuck trying to clean up a mess you helped create. You're wrong. Then prove it. Walk away. Let Rebecca figure out her own life without your helpful suggestions. Derek straightened his tie, his composure returning. You're making a mistake, Jake. Rebecca's going places. She needs someone who can match her ambition. And that someone is you? It could be. At least he was being honest now. Then you'd better hope she's learned to stand up for herself. Because if she'll throw me away after 8 years, what do you think she'll do to you when the pressure's on? Derek's smile returned, but it was colder now. I guess we'll find out. After he left, I called Lisa. Jake, how are you holding up? Fine. Derek just paid me a visit. Oh no. What did he want? To position himself as Rebecca's white knight. How is she? Lisa sighed. Not good. She didn't come to work today. When I stopped by her apartment this morning, she looked like she hadn't slept. She keeps asking if you've said anything about talking to her. And you told her? What you asked me to tell her, that you forgive her but can't forget. She cried for an hour. I felt a stab of guilt, but pushed it aside. Lisa, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest. Okay. How long has Derek been working on Rebecca? Really working on her? The pause told me everything. A few months, maybe longer. It started subtle. Comments about her career, about what she deserved, about how she was settling. I thought he was just being a typical arrogant lawyer. Did Rebecca encourage it? No. She shut him down every time. But Jake, the constant pressure, the suggestions that she could do better, that she was wasting her potential, I think it got to her, especially when everyone kept asking about marriage. And Derek knew exactly which buttons to push. I think so. God, I feel terrible. I should have said something. It's not your fault, Lisa. Derek's a predator, and Rebecca was vulnerable, but she still made her choice. She wants to see you, to explain. There's nothing to explain. She said what she meant in the moment that mattered most. Jake, please, she's destroying herself over this. No, Lisa. She destroyed us over this. There's a difference. That evening, I did something I hadn't done in years. I went to Murphy's Bar, a dive near the docks where nobody cared about law firms or dinner parties. I ordered a beer and watched the game, enjoying the simple pleasure of being somewhere I could just exist without explanation. You look like a man with a story, said the bartender, a grizzled ex-Marine named Pat who'd been running the place for 20 years. Don't we all? Pat laughed. Fair enough, but most guys don't come in here looking like they just escaped from a funeral parlor. I looked down at my clothes, still wearing the dress shirt and slacks from the dinner party, minus the tie. Long night. Woman trouble? Is there any other kind? Pat refilled my beer without being asked. Want some free advice from an old fool who's been divorced 3 times? Why not? The ones who hurt you in public, they'll do it again. The ones who stand by you when things get ugly, those are the keepers. Simple wisdom, but true. Rebecca had chosen to humiliate me in front of people whose opinions mattered to her career. When the pressure was on, she'd thrown me under the bus to save herself. My phone buzzed. Another text from Rebecca. Jake, please. I know I don't deserve it, but I need to see you, to explain what really happened. For the first time since the dinner party, I responded, There's nothing to explain. You made your position clear. The reply came immediately. I was scared. Derek and his friends kept pushing about marriage, about my future, about what I deserved. I panicked and said something horrible. But I didn't mean it. But you said it, in front of everyone. When you had the chance to defend us, you chose to attack me instead. I know, I hate myself for it. But Jake, I love you. I've loved you for 8 years. One moment of panic doesn't erase that. I stared at the message for a long time before typing, Love isn't enough if you can't trust me with your fears. You let Derek get in your head instead of talking to me. That's not a partnership. Please, give me a chance to make this right. Rebecca, answer me honestly. If Derek asked you out tomorrow, would you say yes? The pause stretched long enough that I had my answer. I don't know, I'm so confused right now. Everything feels broken. That's your answer right there. You're not mourning our relationship. You're mourning the safety net you lost when you decided to burn it down. That's not fair. Neither was what you said at dinner. The difference is, I'm not saying it in front of an audience. I put the phone away and ordered another beer. Pat was right. The ones who hurt you in public will do it again. Rebecca had shown me exactly who she was when the pressure was on. I'd be a fool to ignore that lesson. Over the next few days, I threw myself into work. The store needed attention I'd been too distracted to give it, and focusing on inventory and customer service kept my mind occupied. The gossip mill continued churning. Customers and neighbors offered their opinions, most supporting my decision to walk away. A few suggested I was being too harsh, that everyone deserved a second chance. But it was Mrs. Patterson, my elderly neighbor, who put it in perspective. That girl sat in our hallway crying for over an hour, she said, when I ran into her at the mailboxes. But you know what I noticed? What's that? She never once said she was wrong about what she said, only that she was sorry for saying it. There's a difference. Mrs. Patterson was right. In all of Rebecca's messages and voicemails, she'd apologized for the timing, the setting, the public nature of her outburst. But she'd never actually said the words themselves were wrong. On Friday, exactly 1 week after the dinner party, Derek called me. Jake, we need to talk. No, we don't. It's about Rebecca. She's not handling this well. That's not my problem anymore. She didn't come to work again today. She's not answering calls. I'm worried about her. I almost laughed. So you're calling her ex-boyfriend for help? That's rich. Look, I know you think I have ulterior motives. I know you have ulterior motives. The question is whether you're smart enough to realize Rebecca's not the prize you thought she was. Derek's voice hardened. What's that supposed to mean? It means you got what you wanted. Rebecca's single, vulnerable, and looking for someone to validate her choices. But she's also someone who will destroy an 8-year relationship rather than have an honest conversation about her fears. Good luck with that. You're being cruel. I'm being realistic. Rebecca showed everyone who she really is under pressure. You can either learn from that or repeat my mistakes. Your choice. I hung up before he could respond. That evening, Lisa called. Jake, I'm scared. Rebecca won't talk to anyone. She's been holed up in her apartment since Wednesday. She won't answer the door, won't return calls. The only reason I know she's alive is because her car's moved a few times. Have you considered calling someone? A professional? I tried. She hung up on me when I suggested it. Jake, I know you're angry and you have every right to be, but she needs help. Then help her, but don't expect me to be part of the solution. I'm not responsible for fixing the damage she caused. She's talking about quitting her job, about leaving town. Maybe that's for the best. A fresh start might be exactly what she needs. Jake, please, I've never heard you sound so cold. I'm not cold, Lisa. I'm done. There's a difference. But after I hung up, I found myself staring out the window, wondering if I was being too harsh. Rebecca was clearly struggling, and part of me, the part that had loved her for 8 years, wanted to reach out. Then I remembered the look on her face when she'd said those words, the conviction in her voice, the way she'd looked right at me when she declared I could never be a good husband. No. Mrs. Patterson was right. Rebecca wasn't sorry for what she'd said. She was sorry for the consequences. On Saturday morning, I was opening the store when a familiar car pulled into the parking lot. Rebecca sat behind the wheel for several minutes before finally getting out. She looked terrible. Her usually perfect hair hung limp and unwashed. She wore sweatpants and an oversized hoodie, no makeup, dark circles under her eyes. This wasn't the polished attorney who'd humiliated me at the dinner party. "Jake," she said as she approached the door. "Please, just 5 minutes." Against my better judgment, I let her in and locked the door behind her. "You look awful," I said. "I feel worse." She stood in the middle of the store, looking lost. "I keep replaying that night, over and over. I can't believe I said those things." "But you did say them." "I know. God, I know. I was scared, Jake. Derek and his friends kept pushing about marriage, about my career, about what I deserved. They made it sound like staying with you was settling, like I was wasting my potential. And you believed them. I got confused. The pressure, the questions, everyone staring at me. I panicked and said the worst possible thing." I leaned against the counter, studying her face. "Rebecca, do you remember what you said to me the morning after our first date?" She blinked, confused by the change of subject. "What?" "You said you'd never felt so comfortable with someone, that you could tell me anything without fear of judgment." "I remember." "What happened to that? When did you stop trusting me enough to share your fears?" Her eyes filled with tears. "I don't know. Somewhere along the way, I started listening to other people instead of my own heart. And now? Now I've lost the best thing in my life because I was too scared to defend it." I wanted to comfort her. 8 years of love doesn't disappear overnight. But I also remembered the humiliation, the way she'd looked at me when she'd chosen to attack rather than trust. "Rebecca, if you could go back to that dinner party, what would you do differently?" "I'd tell Derek to mind his own business. I'd tell Harrison that our timeline is none of his concern. I'd stand up for us instead of throwing you away to avoid an uncomfortable conversation." "But you didn't do those things." "No, I didn't." She wiped her eyes with her sleeve. "I failed us both." "Yes, you did." We stood in silence for a moment. Finally, Rebecca spoke again. "Is there any chance, any possibility that we could try again? I know I don't deserve it, but—" "Rebecca, stop!" She looked up at me with desperate hope. "You want to know the truth? I forgive you for what you said. People say stupid things when they're scared. But I can't forget how easily you threw away 8 years of trust. When the pressure was on, you chose to hurt me rather than disappoint strangers. I can change. I can be better. Maybe you can, but not with me. I'll always be waiting for the next time you panic and decide I'm the problem. That's not fair. Neither was what you said at dinner. The difference is, I'm saying this privately, with compassion, instead of humiliating you in public." Rebecca's face crumpled. "So that's it? 8 years and you're just done?" "I'm done being with someone who sees me as an obstacle to their happiness instead of a partner in building it." "I never saw you as an obstacle." "Then why was your first instinct to attack me instead of defend us?" She had no answer for that. "Rebecca, you need to figure out who you are and what you want. But you need to do it without using me as a safety net. I'm not going to be here waiting if Derek doesn't work out, or if the next guy disappoints you." "Derek?" "I'm not interested in Derek. I told you that. You also told me I could never be a good husband. Forgive me if I don't put much stock in your declarations anymore." She flinched as if I'd slapped her. Jake, please. I love you. I know you do. But love isn't enough if you can't trust me with your fears. And I can't trust someone who'll sacrifice our relationship to avoid an awkward conversation. Rebecca stood there for another minute, tears streaming down her face. Finally, she nodded. I understand. I hate it, but I understand. She moved toward the door, then turned back. For what it's worth, you would have been an amazing husband. I was the one who wasn't ready to be a good wife. After she left, I sat in the empty store for a long time, processing the conversation. Part of me wanted to run after her, to try to rebuild what we'd had. But the larger part knew I'd made the right choice. Rebecca had shown me who she was under pressure. I'd be a fool to ignore that lesson. The weeks that followed brought a strange kind of peace. Rebecca left town, taking a job with a firm in another state. Derek, deprived of his prize, moved on to other conquests. The gossip died down, replaced by newer scandals and dramas. I threw myself into rebuilding my business and my life. The store started turning a profit again. I reconnected with old friends I'd neglected during the relationship. I even started dating again, though nothing serious. 6 months later, Lisa called with news. Rebecca's engaged. I was replacing a display of camping gear and barely looked up from my work. Good for her. Jake, did you hear me? She's getting married. I heard you. I hope she's happy. Aren't you curious about who? Not really. Lisa sighed. It's not Derek, if you're wondering. Some lawyer she met at her new job. They've been together 4 months. 4 months and already engaged? That seems fast. That's what I thought. But she says she knows what she wants now. Maybe she does. Maybe almost losing everything taught her to value what she has. Do you ever think about what might have been? I considered the question seriously. Sometimes. But then I remember that dinner party, and I'm grateful things worked out the way they did. Grateful? Rebecca did me a favor, Lisa. She showed me exactly who she was when the pressure was on. Better to learn that after 8 years than after 8 years of marriage. That's very philosophical of you. That's very practical of me. I deserve someone who'll stand with me when things get difficult, not someone who'll throw me under the bus to save face. And have you found that someone? I smiled, thinking of Sarah, the veterinarian I'd been seeing for the past month. She was nothing like Rebecca, quieter, more grounded, completely uninterested in impressing anyone but herself. When her ex-husband had shown up at our second date trying to cause drama, she'd calmly told him to leave and then apologized to me for the interruption. Maybe. It's early, but the signs are promising. I'm glad, Jake. You deserve to be happy. So does Rebecca. I hope this works out better for her. And I meant it. The anger had faded, replaced by a kind of detached goodwill. Rebecca had made her choice that night at the dinner party. I'd made mine by walking away. We'd both have to live with the consequences. A year later, I ran into Derek at a coffee shop downtown. He looked older, more worn around the edges. Jake, he said, approaching my table with the same artificial smile I remembered. How are you? Good. You? Can't complain. Business is good. He gestured to the empty chair across from me. Mind if I sit? I shrugged. Derek settled into the chair and ordered a latte from the passing waitress. I heard Rebecca got married, he said. So I'm told. Funny how things work out. Is it? Derek shifted uncomfortably. Look, I owe you an apology. About that whole situation. I was out of line. Yes, you were. I convinced myself I was looking out for Rebecca's best interests, but really I was just, I don't know. Jealous, maybe. Maybe? Okay, definitely jealous. You had something real with her, something I wanted. I studied his face, looking for signs of manipulation, but he seemed genuinely contrite. Derek, can I ask you something? Sure. Do you think you would have been happy with Rebecca? Really happy? He considered the question seriously. Honestly? Probably not. She was never really available emotionally. Even when she was angry with you, she was still thinking about you. And now? Now she's someone else's problem. He caught himself. Sorry, that came out wrong. I just meant, she's moved on. We all have. Some of us moved on faster than others. Derek laughed ruefully. Fair point. For what it's worth, Jake, you handled that whole thing with more class than I would have. I had good teachers. Your parents? The military. They teach you that sometimes the best response is no response. Let your actions speak louder than your words. Derek nodded. Smart philosophy. We sat in comfortable silence for a moment. Then Derek spoke again. She asked about you, when she was still in town. Wanted to know if you were seeing anyone, if you seemed happy. And what did you tell her? That you seemed fine. Better than fine, actually. Like a weight had been lifted. It had been. She didn't like hearing that. I imagine not. Rebecca always assumed she was irreplaceable. Weren't you tempted to take her back? She was pretty broken up about the whole thing. I thought about the question seriously. For about 5 minutes. Then I remembered that she'd chosen to humiliate me rather than trust me with her fears. That's not the foundation for a marriage. You really think it was that calculated? I think Rebecca panicked and chose the path that felt safest in the moment. Unfortunately, that path led straight through my heart. Derek winced. When you put it like that... Look, Derek, I don't hold grudges. Rebecca made her choice, I made mine. But I learned something important that night. What's that? That walking away with dignity is sometimes the most powerful thing you can do. It forces everyone else to live with the consequences of their actions without giving them a target to blame. Derek finished his latte and stood to leave. Jake, I think Rebecca realized too late what she'd lost. The guy she married, he's nothing like you. Good. She doesn't need another me. She needs someone who matches who she is now. And who are you now? I smiled, thinking of Sarah, who was probably at the animal clinic dealing with some crisis involving a cat and a ball of yarn. Someone who knows his worth and won't settle for less than he deserves. Derek extended his hand. For what it's worth, I'm sorry for my part in all of this. I shook his hand. Apology accepted. But Derek, next time you want something someone else has, try earning it instead of undermining it. He had the grace to look embarrassed. Point taken. After he left, I sat in the coffee shop thinking about the strange turns life takes. A year ago, I'd thought I was building toward marriage with Rebecca. Now I was dating someone who made me laugh every day and never once made me question my worth. Sometimes the best thing that can happen to you is having someone show you exactly who they are when the pressure's on. Rebecca had done me that favor, even if she hadn't meant to. My phone buzzed with a text from Sarah. Emergency at the clinic. Might be late for dinner. Rain check? I typed back. Of course. Need any help? Just your patience. Thanks for understanding. I smiled as I put the phone away. That was the difference between Sarah and Rebecca right there. Sarah communicated her needs clearly and trusted me to respond with support rather than judgment. It had taken losing Rebecca to realize how much I'd been settling for. The constant anxiety about her moods, the walking on eggshells around her career stress, the way she'd started treating our relationship like an obligation rather than a choice. Walking away from that dinner party had been the best decision I'd made in years, not because it felt good, it had hurt like hell, but because it had forced both of us to confront who we really were. Rebecca was someone who would sacrifice a relationship to avoid an uncomfortable conversation. I was someone who deserved better than that. The truth was, I was grateful to her now. Not for the humiliation, but for the clarity. She'd shown me exactly what I didn't want in a partner, which made it easier to recognize what I did want when Sarah came along. Sometimes the most devastating moments in your life turn out to be the most liberating. You just have to be brave enough to walk away from what's familiar and trust that something better is waiting. And sometimes, the perfect response to betrayal isn't revenge or forgiveness. Sometimes it's simply refusing to participate in the drama and letting the other person live with the consequences of their choices. Rebecca had made her choice that night at the dinner party. I'd made mine by walking away. We'd both have to live with the results. But as I sat in that coffee shop, thinking about Sarah's laugh and the way she never made me question my worth, I knew I'd chosen correctly. The best revenge, it turned out, was living well.